Okay, we are learning Pesachim. Daf Kuf Zayin Amud Beis is tonight's Amud. Who's pumped? I'm pumped. We are going to start on the bottom of Kuf Zayin Amud Aleph. We are actually being brought back to the Mishnah after this long hiatus. If you remember how our Mishnah, our parak began with Arvei Pesachim Samuch LeMincha LaYechel Adam Techshach. That's how we started. Remember that? Erev Pesachim Samach LeMincha LeYechel Ad Mach Techshach. Then what happened? We got involved with Machlekes Reb Yehuda and Reb Yosi and Reb Yehuda about Erev Shabbos and Erev Pesach, when you're allowed to start eating, when you have to stop eating, but you have to stop. Peres Mav Makadesh. Then we got into Havdalah and Birchas Hamazon and Tuna Kais. We spoke about the Kais. Havdalah we did a lot about. Yakin all that stuff. And now we're back to the Mishnah. So the second to last line on Kuf Zayin Amud Aleph, Samach LeMincha. Okay, you ready? Samach LeMincha. So we said Samach LeMincha, you got to stop eating. Now, before we get into the question of which Minchah are we discussing, we're talking about Minchah Gedolah, which we'll call 12:30, or Minchah Ketanah, which we'll call 3:30. That's either 6.5 hours into the day or 9.5 hours into the day. Minchah Gedolah, Minchah Ketanah. Why in the world is this called Minchah? How did it get its name? Isn't that a great question? You with me on that one? Like why do we call Minchah Minchah? Like the prayer Minchah. Why do we call it Minchah? Anybody? Mincha is an offering that was brought on the base of Mikdash. Mincha is a gift. It's really a matana. Mincha is an offering, is like a gift, and specifically a cake. So why are we calling like this tefillah Mincha? To take a look at Tesis. You think I'm loony? This is Tesis. Last Tesis on the page. Kuf Zayin Amud Aleph. You got it? Kuf Zayin Amud Aleph. Samach LeMincha. Tema. If you look at the little Yud Beis, you see the Yud Beis next to the Samach. So on the bottom of the page somewhere it says that this is really Shayach to Tzedek Tesam Beis. This Tesis really belongs on the Mishnah. It's nothing to do with the Gemara. It's on the Mishnah. Samach LeMincha. Now, Tema was a wonder. Tema. Amai Kailei Mincha. Why are you calling this Mincha? Why is this period or why is the period called Mincha? Why is the tefillah called Mincha? The imisham the Mincha haisa kareva. Oh, so Teza has an idea. You know what? The carbon Mincha was brought bein harbayim. The carbon Mincha was brought with the tamid shel bein harbayim and had a Mincha to go along with it. Yeah, we're familiar with that. Can I bother you for a sitter? I should really ask for a chumash, but it's just easier to find in the sitter, I think. What? Ashkenaz also has karbanis. If you weren't sure, people may not be aware, but we also say, I mean, I guess we say it, but the parsha is tamid. So what does it say? It says, okay, so the there was an asiris ha'ifa soilas as a mincha was brought with the tamid shel ben arbayim. So maybe that's why. Tesis. We're in the Tesis Kuf Zayin Amud Aleph. Last Tesis. Why is the period of time in the afternoon called Mincha? So Tesis says the Mincha is a kreva ben arbayim. The Mincha was brought in the afternoon. That's an interesting Sarah. Tesis halagam b'shachar kreva minchas chavitin and minchas tamid. There were two minchas brought in the morning. The minchas tamid was brought, and there was a minchas chavitin, or the kain gadol every day brought a mincha. So why wouldn't you call a shachris mincha? Like if it's the carbon mincha that was brought with the tamid, so then you could have done that by shachris too. That says this is kasha. V'yesh loymar. B'shachar yesh shem acher. Tefillah shachris. Okay. Well, the morning has a different name. It's called shachris. So therefore, we can call the afternoon mincha because we brought a mincha. I mean, you could have called shachris mincha because of the mincha that was brought, but we have another name for that. It's called shachris. So therefore we can call mincha, we can finally call, so I guess there was like this longing to call a tefillah after the carbon mincha. I don't know, I'm being a little facetious there. I'm not sure what the pshat in this one is. Va'oid, and furthermore, the amrinon prepare kama de brachas. The Gemara tells us in the first parak of brachas, havizar betfilas mincha, be very careful with the tefillah of mincha. Sha'af Eliyahu loinena el betfilas mincha. You should be careful with mincha. You know why? Because Eliyahu Hanavi, when he was on Har Carmel, he was only answered with the tefillah of mincha. So, like, why are we calling that a tefillah of mincha? That's the same. We're showing the same kasha. The shema b'shas hakravas mincha nene. Maybe when he was bringing the mincha, that's when he was answered. A speculation of Tesis that when he brought karbanis on Har Carmel, Eliyahu Navi, that was a what's that called? Hayrasha. You're not allowed to bring a carbon outside, whatever. He brought it on the mountain. So he brought the carbon mincha, he brought the carbon, and maybe he brought a mincha also, and therefore maybe he was only answered b'shas the mincha. So that's why, and that's an Eis Ratzon. So maybe that's why we call the tefillah of mincha, because we're tapping into the energy of Eliyahu Navi's tefillah, which he was answered at that that Eis Ratzon of mincha when he was bringing the carbon mincha. So that's why we call it mincha. Okay, fantastic. Interesting that Tesis never. I don't think he ever discussed this, and maybe he did in brachas. Maybe it's on like Gemara there. I don't remember. Okay. Let's get back into our sugi here. Okay, but we're talking about that you got to stop eating on Erev Pesach. Samach lemincha. Rashbam said a half hour before mincha. So we want to know, correct the Gemara. Ibayluhu. It was asked the Shail on the Beis Medrash. Samach lemincha Gedolah Ketanah. Are we talking about Samach lemincha Gedolah? Mincha Gedolah again is 6.5 hours into the day. So Samach lemincha Gedolah would be at Chatzos. Or when do you have to stop eating? Samach lemincha Ketanah Tanan. The Mishnah is referring to mincha Ketanah, 9.5 hours into the day. Samach lemincha Ketanah, 9 hours into the day. Which one is it? Well, what's the shayla? I don't know. What's the? I don't know. Says, well, I'll give you a svar for each one. Samach lemincha Gedolah Tanan umishum Pesach. Is the reason why we want you to stop by mincha Gedolah is because you want to make sure you bring your carbon Pesach. Because if you're going to be eating then, dilma asil memshach, maybe you'll end up continuing va'asil imnuye milva'ebed pischa, and you'll end up not bringing the carbon Pesach. 9:15. That is, take a look at the Rashbam at the bottom of the page. V'mishum Pesach shema yoyshe besuda v'yipasha maaseh asais Pesach. You'll be pashayin, you won't bring a carbon Pesach. So when did you bring the carbon Pesach? The carbon Pesach was brought after the carbon Tamid. And on Erev Pesach, on Erev Shabbos, Erev Pesach, they would bring the carbon Tamid at the earliest possible time, which was at Mincha Gedolah. And when they finished that, they would bring the Pesach. So therefore, we would say, "Hey, stop eating before that, because if you may end up missing the carbon Pesach." That would be a shanda. You imagine that, a guy pressing on Erev Pesach and missing the carbon Pesach. So we say, you know what? Don't eat. Maybe that's what the Mishnah is talking about. Or idilma kovzayin amid beis, or perhaps samach lemincha Ketanah. We're talking about samach lemincha Ketanah umishum matzah. And the issue that we're concerned is that maybe you won't eat the matzah. Dilma asi lemichla lematzi. You'll end up eating the matzah achila gasa. You'll be too stuffed, and you'll end up eating the matzah on achila gasa. Achila gasa means when you're stuffed, and therefore you won't fulfill the mitzvah. Now, why wouldn't that svara work for the Pesach also? Or maybe it would. You with me on this one? Zakter Rashbam, first Rashbam on the page. Says Rashbam, B'hainu b'gemar tashois, d'mitesha shois u'machza havizman da'kravas tamid shel kol hashana. At 9.5 hours, that is when they would bring the carbon tamid, ukeshu mu'ucher, when it was delayed. The hashta mishum imnuya mi pesach laka. We don't have to be concerned that you're not going to bring the carbon Pesach. The Erev Pesach hoya hatamid karbon shmeino mechza, because they brought the carbon tamid earlier. the Pesach Acharav. Miyad, they immediately started bringing the carbon Pesach. Lefikach and Bo Lechel Samach LeMincha Ketanah. If you're going to start eating Samach LeMincha Ketanah, then it'll be Gemar Teisha Kvar Nishchara Pesach. You already brought your carbon Pesach, so you don't have to be concerned that you're messing up on the carbon Pesach, right? Time-wise, you brought the carbon Tamid earlier, then you brought your carbon Pesach right away. So Samach LeMincha, the guy's going to start his Suda then, not a problem. So what is the concern? The concern is going to be for the matzah. You shouldn't be too hungry. You shouldn't be stuffed when you eat the matzah. When he nami the Mishnah Pesach well, why aren't you concerned that you can eat the carbon Pesach and achilagasa? The avagav do nechal seva. Even though you eat the matzah, the carbon Pesach when you're full. But you're not allowed to eat an achila gasa. I tell you, he's burning. Well, anyway, you have to eat the carbon pesach when you're already satisfied, right? That's when you eat the carbon pesach ala seva. So, what we're going to tell you, what are we going to tell you to do? Not to eat, and then you're going to end up, you have to stop eating, but you have to eat food at the suda anyway. So you're going to end up eating at the meal because you eat carbon pesach last. He says, it's true, but an achila gasa, you're not allowed to eat. If you eat an achila gasa, you come Pesach, you don't fulfill your mitzvah. You know what an achila gasa is considered in kachim? If you eat it when you're stuffed, it's called a mazik, Rashbam says. If you kachim mazik, hu dechashvin lebim yavavis. El mishum delagabe lechem havi achila gasa b'achilim mu'etes. You know why? Because if you're going to eat bread or lechem or matzah, then you don't have to eat too much to be full. Right? When it comes to eating meat, you always eat a little bit more meat, right? But eating bread, a little bit of food, you don't want to interested in eating bread. So therefore, we're more concerned about the matzah than we are for the Pesach. That's first teretz of Rashbam. Second teretz, inami rebusa kama. We're saying a chiddush because if the concern is only for Pesach, then guess what? Nowadays we don't have a carbon Pesach, so we could eat until there would be no iser. It's only because of matzah this halacha even applies nowadays. Says Taisus, inami rebusa kamar v'achi kamar idilma samach l'mincha Ketanah v'afilu b'zman haleka Pesach deleka lamecha shlasiyasei v'le'achilas. We don't have to be concerned you're going to miss the carbon Pesach or you're not going to eat the carbon Pesach. Mishum achilas matzah miya ika, but there's still a concern for achilas matzah. The lehevi achilagasa chashina. You don't want to end up eating matzah achilagasa. Again, Rashbam wanted to know why aren't we concerned for carbon Pesach, eating the carbon Pesach achila gasa? Answers Taisus, answers Rashbam, because either we're more concerned for bread than we are for meat. Number two, we want it to apply nowadays as well. Yishmak? Pretty good. Okay. Now, so Zev was wondering, 1 second. We said something else on Tzaddik Tes Amud Beis. We didn't say that maybe you're going to eat the matzah achila gasa. We said on Daf. What did we say? Mishum chiyuv de matzah. Rashbam. The Gemara didn't say anything. He just said because of the chiyuv of matzah, and the Rashbam said mishum hider mitzvah. So what happened over here? There he says it's a shum hider mitzvah. Here he's saying the Gemara says first it's because of achila gasa. Now it's interesting. Rashi here says if you look at the second line from the top of the page, umishum matzah sheyikonis la kishahu taiva. You should eat it when you're hungry. That was like the Gemara we said on Tzaddik Tes Amud Beis. Possible Rashi didn't have the girsa of achila gasa. The Rashbam for sure does because he's busy with achila gasa over here. So what's going on? So Taisus here says he's got a different issue. Taisus, he's got a different issue. His issue is that the Gemara seems to call a guy who eats achila gasa his carbon Pesach and achila gasa, he's called a pesheya, but he's not called a rasha. Mashma that he was yotze his mitzvah. If you're not yotze your mitzvah, then you'd be called a rasha. If you're yotze your mitzvah, but you just didn't do it in a good way, then you'd be called a pesheya. So he wants to know, what do you mean? If you're eating an achila gasa is not called an achila. If you ate an achila gasa on Yom Kippur, right? If you ate a gansa Erev Yom Kippur and you're stuffed, and then you continue eating on Yom Kippur and achila gasa, you're not chayav kares. It's not called achila. So Taisus wants to know why, if you're eating your Pesach or your achila gasa, so then you're not yetzi your mitzvah. So why does the Gemara only call you a Pesheya? It should call you a Russia. That's Taisus Kasha. Pretty stark, if you're not Makayim a Mitzvah, you're called a Russia. So Taisus answers that there are two types of Achila Gasa. If you look at first word on, if you're looking at in the top, in the second Taisus, first word on the line is Rabbeinu Tam, the Reish Tevis, Reish Tuf, for Rabbeinu Tam. I'm Rabbeinu Tam, Trey Gavne Achila Gasa. There are two types of Achila Gasa. Achas shenafshe kotza mila echel. One, when you're disgusted by the food, you can't even look at it and you eat it anyway. Val oisa pater Yom Kippurim. That Achila Gasa, you're exempt from eating on Yom Kippur. Then there's another type of Achila Gasa. You don't really want to eat, but you can eat anyway, but you're not disgusted by the food. So on the second level of Achila Gasa, you fulfill your mitzvah, but you definitely did not do it in the proper way. So maybe that's what the Rashbam is referring to here also. I mean, this is all one Indian, that when we say that we want you to eat the matzah l'teyavon, or to have it, that it should be l'hider mitzvah, that means that you shouldn't be doing it in the Achila Gasa way, which is the Achila Gasa, not that we're not eating, just the Achila Gasa that you're really not interested in, you're not full. There's no hider mitzvah involved. That would be a way to explain Zev's kasha. Okay, let's go weiter. Zok the Heilige Gemara weiter. Toshimas again. So we have a shayla here now. The shayla is when the Mishnah says Samach LaMincha, does it mean Minchah Ketanah or Minchah Gedolah? When do you have to stop eating on Erev Pesach? Minchah Ketanah, Minchah Gedolah. It's a big difference, man. You know what I mean? Not like there's much to eat anyway on Erev Pesach, but we're talking about a 3-hour difference. Says the Gemara, Amar Ravina, Kashima, I'll bring you a raya. Afilu Agrippas, Hamelach, even King Agrippas, Shu Ragol Lechel B'Teisha Shois, who would normally eat 9 hours into the day. You know, Malachim, kings, would get up, when saves my Kriyishma, 3 hours into the day. That's because that's what B'nai Malachim would get up late. And Talmidei Chacham, the Gemara would say, would wait until 6 hours into the day to eat. So Agrippas did both. He woke up late and he felt like a Talmid Chacham. He wouldn't eat until 6 hours later. So he wouldn't eat until 9 hours into the day. Okay. So Oisa Hayayim, on that day, meaning Erev Pesach, Lo Yochel Ad Shetachshach. He shouldn't eat until it gets dark. So says the Gemara. If what we're talking about is Minchah Ketanah, so Hainu Rebusa, the Agrippas. This is the big chiddush of Agrippas, because here he was about to eat breakfast at Samach LaMincha, and we're saying no, you can't eat. You got to fast the whole day. It's too late. You can't eat now. But if we're talking about Samach LaMincha Gedolah, so my Rebusa the Agrippas. What's the chiddush of Agrippas? Chal Isra Lame Kara. This Isra was already chal at by the time he woke up, or the time he wanted to eat, it was already usher. It's not like he was going to go eat and say, no, you can't eat. You couldn't eat anyway. You couldn't eat for the past 3 hours. So what's the chiddush? Meir Busi de Agrippas. What's the big chiddush? How much is man? I'm sorry. I lost it. Meir Busi de Agrippas. Chal Yisrael Aleh Meikar. The Isra was already chal from before. Now let me just ask you. Do you know who Agrippas was? Besides being what Agrippas is, where's that? That's the end of Machane. What? Machane Yehuda. That's where the Chavetz Chaim Butcher is, right? That's but he was a king. So who was he? So Rashbam says Melech Kasher Haya. He was a good king. Migmalche Chashmonai, from the Chashmonai era, and he wouldn't eat until 9 hours into the day. Pesach is like 1 second. Third text on the page. Afilu Agrippas Melech Pirush Rashbam Melech Kasher u'Bnei Chashmonai Haya. V'loi duck. Jesus says, sorry, Rashbam, you didn't get this one right. The Besaita, in Saita Amri, the Gemara says, Kishihigia, when the king, the king would read by Hakel. So when he got to the pasuk in the Varim that says, Mikerev Achicha Tasim Alecha Melech, from amongst your brothers, you should appoint yourself a king. Zolgu Ein of Demais, he started to cry. Why? Because maybe his father wasn't Jewish. he was definitely not. And then the Chacham were saying, told him that it's okay, and they were Mechayiv Kli for that. That was bad for them. So that was Agrippas. So I don't know. I thought when the Rashbam said Melech Kasher, it meant that he was a good guy. He wasn't like evil. In terms of keeping, it's interesting. If you were a king, but you shouldn't be king, but you're a good guy. Do we call you a Melech Kasher? Or you're like, dude, if they're not supposed to be king, step down. I don't know. That's an interesting one. But okay, but he was, from the base Chashmonaim, after Hordas, they weren't Roy for Malchus. Okay, so this was Agrippas. We have a Rai from Agrippas L'Chaira that the Mishnah is talking about Samach L'Minchah Ketanah, because otherwise, what's the big chiddush of the Bryce that even Agrippas didn't eat? And no one could eat. It was right from 6 hours, from 3 hours ago. Okay, so says the Gemara.
The Rashbam, there's this yarn that says that they not have been Agrippas, but rather than not pay Hordas, which that would fit in with Joseph's sentence, which is what you're referencing. That wasn't from a Jewish staff.
Right. Well, what is it? What does it say?
It says, like there's another gear that says, not pay Hordas.
Or not mi Malchik Hashmonoi.
Not pay Hordas, so it's error.
Yes, that's really shver. Why is he calling him a Melech Kasher? Dalit. I said that. Siva Melech Hordas. Yeah.
They were all.
Yeah. Okay. The comment was made that in the Rashbam Memalchik Hashmonoi, the Meseres Shas adds that maybe it wasn't Memalchik Hashmonoi, but Memalchik Hordas, which for sure not. Jewish. The Gemara says that Hordas took the last of the Chashmayim. He killed all of them. He was an Eved, and then he killed everybody, and then he then he did some weird stuff. And then so the Gemara says that anybody who says that he's from Hordas, that he's an Eved. Okay. In any event, another issue. Let's look at the second wide line, very wide line. The Rashbam. He says, "Save my Rebisa de Agrippas." What was the chiddush of Agrippas? Hamatale itan isurei. Koidim shigmar. This is a big chiddush of Rashbam. Meaning, when is he going to start eating? He's going to start eating. He eats b'teisha shos. So why can't he start then and then finish later? We hold you that if you start b'zman heter, you can continue eating into the zman iser. So says the Rashbam. Before he finishes his Suda, it's going to be the Zman Isser. Comes along the Rashbam and says, the Afilu Rabbi Yosi, the Palik Baf Sakas Erev Pesach B'Reish Pirka, even according to Rabbi Yosi, who argues and says you're allowed to start a meal on Erev Pesach. No, he's maskim on Erev Pesach, he can't start. But he says you don't have to stop once you started Bizman Heter. Right? Rabbi Yosi held that if you started eating beheter, you can continue eating. Here he would agree the asad that you would have to stop. Because he was planning on finishing his meal when he's not allowed to start. You hear this one? You're not allowed. Even Rabbi Yosi agrees that again. Rabbi Yosi holds that if you start Bizman Heter, it can come to Pesach. You can continue eating. You don't have to be mafsek. But even Rabbi Yosi agrees you're not allowed to start a Suda planning on finishing after the Zman Isser. Meaning, if you want to have a little Suda now, wash and bench right before the 9 hours into the day, that's fine. But the plan that I'm going to start Bizman Heter and plan for it to continue, and to plan to finish afterwards, that you're not allowed to do. Now, if you had a Suda, it got slept on, maybe you drank too much, you're having a failed time, and you're planning on finishing, but it just continued, that would be okay. You don't even have to stop if it goes into Pesach. Every Pesach.
Only Erev Pesach, or any time where you can start.
It seems like anytime that you're starting a Suda and you're planning on going into the Zman Isser, that would be, now again, according to Rabbi Yossi, it's only Nageya on Erev Pesach, because Rabbi Yossi holds you're always allowed to start. On Erev Shabbos Yantiv, you can eat you can start whenever you want. Right? But according to him, he holds that you're not allowed to start on Erev Shabbos, Samach LeMincha. He holds that you also can't start if you're planning on continuing or finishing after the Zman Isser. If it happens, it's okay, but you're not allowed to plan on that. Whoa. Okay. So says the Gemara, is this a good raya or not? So there's the Gemara. Say my group. Where to go here? So my group is Chali Yisrael. So the Gemara says Ella Samachol Men Ketanah. So the Gemara, I'm sorry, I went ahead. Say my Rebusei de Agrippas. Hamatil is Mani Surah. What's the chiddush of Agrippas? The Maisa, you can't eat after 9.5 hours. Says the Gemara, I would have thought to say Teisha Shois La Agrippas is Ka'arba Shois Di Dandami. Maybe you would say, listen, he always eats 9 hours into the day. And that's what normal people eat 4 hours into the day. So maybe his 9 hours is like everybody else's 4 hours. Says the Gemara, Kamashula, nah, that's the Chiddush of the Brisa. That even though he normally eats later, and then I guess you would think since he normally eats later, so maybe he'd be able to, I guess his metabolism, it won't bother him. Says the Rashba, since he normally eats 9 hours into the day, so meaning he's used to eating late and then eating again. So he'd be able to eat the matzah l'teyavon like we would eat, meaning we normally eat at 4 hours into the day. And if we eat at 4 hours into the day, when we get to the matzah, we're hungry. So he normally eats at 9 hours into the day. He probably, when he gets later into the night, he'll also be able to eat the matzah l'teyavon. The commercial that it's still us to do that. Okay. So that's the chiddush. Okay. Amar Reb, I don't know who that is. Amar, maybe Reb Asi or Reb Yossi. Aval, even if you can't eat samach mincha, metabel hu b'mini targima. You're allowed to have mini targima. Now, we already brought this tesis. We brought this Gemara in when we were learning the tesis on Salak Tesam and Beis, that you're allowed to be metabel b'mini targima. What are mini targima? The Rashbam says basar and peiros, without any bread. So you're allowed to eat fruit and you're allowed to eat meat. Okay. Taisa says mini targima are going to be mezainis, things that you can make a mezainis on. Now, what can you make a mezainis on that you're allowed to eat on Erev Pesach? So this gets into a shayla whether you're allowed to eat Ketanah. You definitely can't eat things made with what's that called, matzah meal, right? Even if you mix it with other stuff, that's eating matzah. Maybe it's matzah shir, maybe it's not matzah shir, but that you can't eat. But what about, can you eat if you cook it? So that like it loses its turasa. So the shayla would be really Ketanah. Can you have Ketanah on Erev Pesach? Where you're making a mezainis on those, but they're cooked. What? You need gebrach, yeah. Right, correct. So that's the minhagim that possibly, I forgot what the Ramah, I think the shayla of the Ramah is matter that or not.
I would think, even if you
I don't know what to do. The question was if people who don't eat gebrach, would they eat it in Erev Pesach? I don't know. It's a minute, but it's a shot. Yeah, but you're not allowed to eat. You're not allowed to eat matzah, and you're not allowed to eat. And they have a chashash that it's going to be chametz, right? I have no idea what they do. No clue. I doubt it. But that may be the mizanus that we're talking about, which would be something that was cooked. Okay. So that's what Rabbi says, that you're allowed to eat mini targima on Erev Pesach. Rabbi Yitzchak matbil biyarki. He would have lots of vegetables. Why would he eat lots of vegetables? Because that would get his appetite going. It didn't fill him up, but it got his appetite going. So that's why he'd be able to eat. Matzah b'te'avin. Okay. Says the Gemara. Tani nam yach. I'll bring you a raya. Hashamish matbil b'bnei me'ayin v'noistim l'fnei ha'orchi. The shamish, a shamish, someone who's serving you a meal, would be matbil b'bnei me'ayin. So that sounds like they had animals that were already shachted for the Suda. I'm reading the Rashbam. Hashamish matbil b'nei me'ayim kalema. B'nei me'ayim shal behemas hanishchates l'Suda yomtiv. V'gam noisin mehem l'fnei ha'orchin hamenuin yachad al Pesach. Whoever came back around, this is what he would give the guests in Erev Pesach. They sheichlu matzu Pesach l'te'avin. Ube Erev Pesach kay b'tesaf. It's talking about Erev Pesach. V'afilu min ha'mincha l'mal d'le'el b'nei. Tanya Erev Pesach samach l'mincha lo yechal. So this is what he'd be feeding them. He'd be feeding them b'nei mayayim, which is basar, which is the Rashbam got his idea that minit agima is referring to the basar. Now, v'aval b'shein ra'il davar. Even though I have no proof that an achila, eating some food, will be moishach on your appetite, will get your appetite going. I mean, that's the point. If it's like 8 vegetables and he's bringing them the b'nei mayayin, and the idea was that this will get your appetite going, you'll be able to eat more. So I don't have a proof for it. Zeichel davar. I have a little remiss to this. Shenema, the pasuk says, "Niru lachem nir val tizru el hakotzim." Plow before you plant. Make sure you plow. This way, you're not zereya el hakotzim. You're not going to end up planting and growing thorns. So what's the raya? So Rashbam explains that that you're if you don't plow before you seed, so then things don't grow well. The seed is not accepted well into the ground. It won't be taken well. So he's saying, so you see, you got to do something to the ground before you're able to plant. So he's saying the same thing applies to food. You got to feed yourself a little bit food to get your appetite going, so you'll be able to eat more. That's the zach. Okay. Now we'll do one more Gemara, and that is Rava. Rava havishasi chamra kule yemid de Pesach. Kule mal yemid de Pesach. He would drink wine on Erev Pesach. Why? Ki heichi de nigrere lelibe. That would get his appetite going. De nechol matzah tvei leorta, so he'd be able to eat more matzah at night. Okay, wine, I guess, could do. We'll discuss. I'm going to stop here because Rav is going to prove his point, why he's going to show you that wine does this for you. But there's a little diak in this Gemara. There's a shaila, is discussion, I should say. I think it was, maybe the Maral says, that there's a mitzvah, all the matzah you eat at Leila Seder is a mitzvah. The kiyum of the mitzvah of matzah, not just for the kazayis that you eat, but all the matzah you eat. And therefore, there are those that are naig to eat only shmur matzah on Leil HaSeder, not just for the mitzvahs of matzah, but the whole night, because you're mekayim a mitzvah be'erev teichel matzah by eating all the matzah. So somebody brought a raya from this Gemara, because why would Rava drink wine? Doesn't say he drank wine so he should be able to eat the matzah l'te'avain. It says so he'll be able to eat more matzah. What do you need to eat more matzah for? You just have to eat your matzah. Why do you want to eat more matzah? So it's a raya that there's a mitzvah to eat a lot of matzah. That every matzah you eat, you're getting a mitzvah for. So there would be an Indian to eat more matzah. That's the lashon of the Gemara. The havishas echam rakuli mal yem de pescha ki heichi the nigrere lelibe. So his appetite will go the nechol matzah tvei leorta. That'll end up eating more matzah at night. Right? There's another way to read the Gemara. If you don't like that, it means yehechi the nigere lelibe tvei the nechol matzah leorta. Like the tvei would be going back and they'll have a big appetite, so they'll be able to eat the matzah l'te'aveh. Okay, Gavaldik. So tonight we learned if the Iker Zman is samach l'mincha, Gedolah samach l'mincha Ketanah. Seems like from the Gemara it's samach l'mincha Ketanah, and then we spoke about eating We spoke about minitagima and having a good appetite for your matzah. Have a wonderful evening.
Why opening up that subject?